The story of an Afghan girl, from escaping the Taliban to fulfilling the dream of Harvard. The air was heavy and cold, and an eerie silence hung over the streets of Kabul. The streets were lifeless, as if everything had been lost to time. After the government fell, the Taliban took over. They were men with stern faces, carrying guns that seemed ready to fire at any moment, and they imposed rules that turned women's lives into a silent prison. Zara, a 19-year-old girl who had always dreamed of studying at the world's best universities, was now trapped within the four walls of her home. She could no longer go to school, walk freely in the streets, or even leave the house without a male relative. But something inside her was burning. A voice, a hope. I will not give up. At night, she would stare at the ceiling of her room and think about how she could escape this cage. Her father, who was once a university professor, had lost his job, and her mother no longer dared to go out. There was no hope for the future, but Zahra couldn't believe that all her dreams would die here. One night, when everyone was asleep, she turned on her brother's old laptop. The internet was still working, but many websites were blocked. Using a VPN, she was able to access foreign websites. She searched for educational opportunities and scholarships. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a sentence: "Emergency scholarship for Afghan women who want to continue their education." Her heart beat faster. She read the requirements: educational transcripts, a personal statement, and an online interview. But there was one big problem. How could she get out of Afghanistan? A few days later, when her mother went to the market to buy bread, Zahra quickly gathered her documents and applied for the scholarship. She waited, checking her email every day until finally the answer came. Your application has been accepted, but you must leave Afghanistan as soon as possible to get a visa. Her hands trembled. How? I'm not even allowed to go out alone, let alone flee the country. But one morning, while sitting in the yard, she overheard her father quietly say to her mother, "So-and-so crossed the border into Pakistan with smugglers. It's difficult, but it's possible." This sentence stuck in Zahra's mind. Smugglers. It was her only way out. But it was a big risk. If the Taliban caught her, her fate would be uncertain. The night before her escape, Zahra put on a black chador, turned off her phone, and packed her documents, some money, and some dried bread in a small backpack. Her family bid her farewell with worried but hopeful eyes. The smuggler was a middle-aged man with a rough face. He loaded a small group of women and children into the back of an old truck in the dark of night. The journey was long and dangerous. There were Taliban checkpoints along the way, and they could be stopped at any moment. When they reached a checkpoint, Zahra's breath caught in her throat. Two Taliban soldiers with guns approached and checked the inside of the truck with their flashlights. The smuggler greeted them warmly and whispered something in their ears. One of them said in a harsh voice, "Who are these people?" The smuggler calmly replied, "Migrants going to see their relatives in Pakistan." The Taliban soldier hesitated for a moment, but finally waved them on. "Go quickly." Zahra didn't dare breathe for a while, but when they were away from the checkpoint, she felt that she was one step closer to freedom. After hours of grueling travel, they finally reached the Pakistani border. There, a guide was waiting to lead them through secret paths. When Zahra finally set foot on Pakistani soil, tears welled up in her eyes. She was no longer in prison. Sometime later, with the help of international organizations, she was able to go to an embassy and get a student visa. She flew from Pakistan to Qatar and from Qatar to America. When she first set foot on the Harvard University campus, she felt that all those nights of fear, all those pains, and all those dangers were worth it. She was here. Zahra, the girl the Taliban wanted to silence, was now at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, and she was determined that one day she would return to Afghanistan and fight for the women of her country.